in the forests of North America, a creature is said to exist. A creature that people are encountering.
Seriously, look how big it is.
With far too many reports to ignore, there are elements of truth behind these accounts that mankind can no longer
It's
ignore.
created almost this obsession where I need to find out
Could the
more.
breeding population of large, upright, hairy hominids really exist in North America? Or is there something more paranormal at work here? DD Woods. If just one footprint, one wood knock, or one howl was real, then man's understanding of primate evolution would be changed forever. Join Gwen Purcell and the Catskill Appalachian Research Collective as they delve further into the mysteries of Bigfoot and other paranormal phenomena through the eyes of witnesses, investigators, critics, and skeptics. Join us as we look to discover what lurks from behind tall trees.
Hi, everybody. I have with me tonight Les O'Dell. He is our guest tonight. So if anybody has any questions, I know there's just only a couple people on right now, but you know the drill. Put them in all capital letters, and we'll ask all of the questions that you have tonight. Okay, so welcome, Les.
And thank you for having me.
And welcome to everybody to From Behind Tall Trees. I'm your host, Gwen Purcell, and we're just going to have a conversation with Les here. We're going to see what he's been doing, what he's up to, what's next. Maybe hear some stories, and everybody and anybody can chime in if they want to. So Les, let's get started. Okay. What got you started in all of this?
Well, probably, or not probably. It was an experience I had as a kid. I was somewhere around between 7 and 8 years old. I remember I was in second grade, but I don't I don't quite remember what time in that second grade area. So between 7 and 8 years old, my family and I had moved into this very old farmhouse. It was a big to me it was big at the time. It was a big 2-story farmhouse. Sorry about that. Had a big sun porch wrapped around the front of it. There was a smoke shed outside. There was a root cellar, outside we used. Had a big barn, and we even have an outhouse. We used the outhouse, believe it or not. But we moved into that house, and from the time we moved into that house, I just had the strangest feeling that there was something odd about the house. I felt like I was being watched all the time. That normal thing you hear from folks. But it got to the point where, after we'd been there for a while, that my brother and I shared the same room. We had bunk beds in the room, in this room, and I was on the bottom, he was on the top bunk, and I started noticing these they weren't exactly shadows of like little looking figures. They were more like just blob shadows, I guess you call it, shapes. And I would notice them going from like where our doorway was on the, like if I was sitting in my bed, it would have been on, the foot of my bed. And so I'd been to the right if I was sitting on the edge of the bed. And I started noticing these shadows moving from the near the doorway, and we go across the room, and almost looked like they would disappear or pass through the wall on the far side of the room. And I, as a young kid, it just scared me to death. And I'd try to scream for my dad. I'd lay there and I just couldn't get to scream out or holler for him at all. So I'd either, cover up and eventually look and see that the shadows were gone, or I'd fall asleep. Well, that happened several. I can't remember how many times, but it wasn't consecutive nights either, but it happened several times, and I noticed these shadows. And then there was one night I was watching them, and I kind of looked in a different direction toward the corner of the room, And that's when I noticed this very tall, dark, black is black shadow. This one had shape. It had the, head, shoulders, arms. You could see the torso, but then from there down, there wasn't any shape. It was like straight, basically. And that was even worse. And the same thing again. I tried to scream for my dad and couldn't because I was so scared. Cover my head up and eventually go away or fall asleep. And then after that happened, I think it was a third or fourth time. I believe it was the third time it happened. I looked in the corner and it's there again. Instead of covering my head up, I actually sat up. And this is why I tell people, some people are like, oh, it's sleep paralysis. That's what happens. No, I was awake because I remember setting up. I actually had, I scooted back into the corner of the bed in the wall where the headboard was in the corner of the wall. And I set up. And when I did, this thing went from looking in the direction where the other shadows were going to looking right at me. And then when it did, I like moved a little bit more, and it was within a split second went from the corner to underneath my bunk, or underneath the top bunk, and was within probably this far from my face, and was leaning in, and I could see the head, I could see shoulders and the arms, like down through here, down through the into here, and it wasn't what you hear a lot of people say. It looked like just black, like a cutout, like a shadow cutout. You hear people say that. This one wasn't. This was black, but I could see inside the shape. It was rolling around. The black. It was almost like smoke was in this.
Oh, wow.
Was inside the shape, and it moved. It swirled. It rolled, and I couldn't do anything. I don't know how long it was there. Probably just a few seconds, but to me it was like forever. And eventually it backed off and turned toward the door. And I hate to say glided, but that's the only way, or, floated. That's the only thing I can, say, relate it to is, and it just looked like it floated through my door, which went into my mom and dad's room, and it turned left, which headed toward the living room, and disappeared, or was out of my sight. And I never seen it again. And not too long after that, we moved. And so that got me into looking into, as a kid, reading some books, and I enjoyed anybody telling me ghost stories, or hearing ghost stories, or I wasn't one to get into like crazy spooky movies, but I just enjoyed actual stories from folks, or something like that. And then later on, I would, as I got older, I started talking to more people, and then I eventually was like, me and my son started a small paranormal group. We just with a couple friends, one of my nephew and a couple other friends, and we started doing some investigating. And so that led me into one. Well, let me back up. I started talking to people because they knew I'd experienced something, and they say, "Hey, can you help me do that? Help me figure out what's going on." And so, right. Me trying to find my answers, I turned that toward, trying to help other folks find answers to what they're experiencing. And so then it led to the starting of the group, and we investigated several locations, a lot of some residential places, and just about anywhere, we could find a place to find something spooky. We did, and that's basically how that got started. And then that led into starting. My son and I, he got into the Bigfoot subject a little. I always had that little bit of curiosity. I've heard the stories. I remember the Pirates of the film, and and I had a curiosity about it. But he,
there's something I want to get on my tablet, but I don't know how much it is.
Okay.
It's called Epic.
Okay, go on.
Can I just get it?
I told you every time.
Dad, I'm sorry. I just couldn't help it.
Go on.
I had to tell you.
I told you he crashes everyone I'm on. Everyone.
It was funny because you're telling the story and you see the door open, but you didn't see him.
Yeah, I heard the door.
It was like, that's good. That was funny.
So he got into listening to some paranormal or podcasts and stuff about Bigfoot, and we started discussing it. And is this, think this is possible? What's what's your thoughts on it? What's my thoughts on things like that.
Right.
And then we're like, why don't we start a Facebook page based here in West Virginia, I guess you'd say, for people to come and share their stories, whether it's ghosts, aliens, Bigfoot, any other creepy cryptid, whatever whatever they wanted to share. So it started out, pretty, pretty small, had a couple hundred people here and there. People shared their stories. And then I shared just one folklore story from Huntington, West Virginia, about a lady in white that would hitchhike. She was supposedly killed on her way to her wedding or something like that. And you could see her on stormy nights. She'll actually hitchhike and get in your car. This is the whole, So I posted that story, and it caught hold, and people started liking it. And it's still one of the biggest posts I've had. It's got like 5,000 shares and like
Oh my gosh.
thousands of people. So it started catching hold, and next thing I know, watch the numbers go up. And then next thing I know, we're at 20 some thousand followers and stuff on Facebook. So
wow, congratulations. That's insane. Have you gone down there and tried to get the lady?
I've been on the hill, but I've been on the 5th Street hill there, but I've never seen anything. No.
Never seen her.
Mm-mm.
So what would you say? Now you said you go to residential places and you help people with their places.
Right.
What's the scariest thing you've come across?
Oh,
there's probably too many.
Besides a couple of the people.
Touche.
I mean, I'm not, I'm not bashing anybody, but there has been a couple people that's been, little, odd, I guess you'd say. It was probably a house I did in Harrison County, West Virginia, that I don't want to give it all. I can't say all of it because it's still, I promised I wouldn't give away a bunch of the details of that. But anyway, this lady calls me and wanted me to invest. She told me she's having things that happen. Well, I'll just tell the story. It's been so long. She'll be all right with it. She won't care. But I won't give away names or anything like that, or locations. Anyway, it was in Harrison County, West Virginia, and she contacted me and said, "Hey, I got some things going on in my house." She goes, my one daughter has been slapped. Felt like she's been slapped.
Oh my gosh.
Her other daughter was hearing basically this breathing, she said, coming from this little. It was like an upstairs house or upstairs bedroom, and has the peaks in the roof, and how some of them old houses had the little, I guess you'd call cubby holes, for a closet. Well, she had one of those in her room, and she would hear breathing coming from that closet.
Wow.
So I was like, okay, I'll come and check it out. And I was like, and she said, well, I'll be here if you don't mind. Come by yourself. I really would like for you to just come by yourself right at this time. I'm like, okay. So I went to the house. We talked. He had done like a initial interview, and she went on to tell me what things were going on, and it was pretty crazy. So I went back. She wanted to know what I was basically going to do in the home. I was like, well, we'll do some EVP stuff, and just see what was going on. She goes, okay, but I'd rather it just be you come, So I went to her home, and she's telling me a couple other things, and she wanted to see what I was going to do. So I had my recorders and stuff, and a camera and whatnot, and we're upstairs in the at the top of the stairs in the second floor, and I'm standing at the top of the stairs. She's standing over in between like her room and her son's room, and she's standing like in the corner, and I think I hear somebody coming up the stairs. There's nobody supposed to be in the house, so I turn and look down at the stairs, and there's no one there. Then when I turned back and looked at her and looked in her direction, there's somebody standing in front of her. Almost not quite transparent, but enough that I can see her still. And there's somebody standing there. I could see this person, and I'm like, hey, the person is gone, and she turns. She goes, what? And I said, somebody was just standing there in front of you. And she says, what do you mean? I said, well, there was a person. And she goes, what did it look like, or who did it? What I said, it looked like there was a man, and I described what I saw, what he looked like. And I could see her face, like, kind of, change. Not change. Her face didn't change, but you get her demeanor change. You can see she went from like then to like she got kind of sad looking. And she goes, "I want you to come downstairs, and I need to show you something." I said, "Okay." So we went downstairs, and we went through her living room, and she says, "Before you got here the other day, I took all the pictures down of my husband. I didn't want you to see my husband." And I was like, "Okay." So she shows me the picture of her husband. And because I had already described what I seen, and she showed me, and it's who I seen. I seen her husband,
Oh my goodness.
and I was like, okay. Now she goes, well, there's more to the story than I need to tell you. I didn't know her husband had passed away. I had no idea. I didn't know she was married, or didn't know she had a husband. I didn't even know if she was divorced or whatnot. She goes, well, let me tell you the whole story here. She goes, we lived in another home in Marion County, West Virginia, and I was married to so and so fella, and we started having issues at the house, or he started having issues. She goes, he was doing certain things, and then we got concerned, so we took him to see a psychiatrist. They diagnosed him with I think schizophrenia or something like that. I forget what it was, or manic depression or something. And I was like, well, okay, what was he doing? She goes, well, he would go to the basement. There was stairs that went down, and underneath the stairs there was a little room, I guess. And he would go down there, and he'd stand, and he would talk to somebody. And I'm like,
Wow.
who did he ever say who he was talking to? And she said, no, he would just talk to somebody. So that's some of the stuff that went on that he went and seen a psychiatrist for, and they put him on medication. And some time went by, he was doing better, she said, and then it kind of progressed a little back into the same, and he would again go downstairs, and he would and then one day he walked through and said, hey, spoke to her like, hey honey, how just a cordial greeting, and they back and forth for a second. He went downstairs, she could hear him talking like he was doing previously, and then all of a sudden she hears a real loud crack. And then next thing she knows, things, there's like stuff flying into the living room. But what he had done is he put a gun under his chin, and he'd shot himself.
Oh,
So
goodness.
they eventually they moved from that home, and then when they got to the other house, things started to happen, and even like I said, the weird things with their daughters and stuff. But I caught some EVPs from that home, the house that she had moved to. We had just walked to the edge of her bedroom, and I caught an EVP. It said "Ready, Freddy." Well, his real name was Frederick. They called him Freddy, and she heard that, and she immediately started crying because I didn't know what it meant at first, and then she told me that's what it was. And then in her son's room, we caught this real nasty, gravelly voice, like gargly, gravelly, that says, "Why did you do this to me?" Like just like that. It just as clear as that. And so, yeah, that things like that started happening. Some other things started happening to her, and I told her, I said, "Hey, you need to find somebody to come in here and help you with the cleansing. Take care of it." But yeah, that was probably some of the scariest stuff that I've gotten into, as far as that's concerned.
Oh my gosh. Have you ever brought anything home with you?
Maybe. Maybe a couple times. My wife doesn't like it, but no. But there's a whole. The one time, I don't know if it's something I brought home with me or something that's been with me for a long time. There's a whole thing that our families, my dad's always called it the O'Dell curse, that we've had an attachment on our family. And that seems to be what this is. You know, we see it every so often. But yeah, one time, this was before my previous wife. We've been together for now 10 years, but I had divorced, and my son and I had went to this old graveyard. It has a legend called the Witch's Grave, and all this stuff, which is not. It's just a legend. She wasn't a witch or anything. But there's been some weird stuff that happens in that graveyard and the church. So one night because this church is built in 1896 or 94. So one night we're in this church because it's always open. You're free to go into church, and we're in the church, and the door just clicked. You hear click and open. So I thought, well, maybe it's the wind blowing. Went up and shut the door. I went back and shut the door, walked back up, and we're standing there, and it sounds like footsteps coming up through the church. And then it sounds like somebody sits down in there, because there's all these pews. All the pews are in the church, and up front there was these 4 chairs off to the side. I don't know why they were there. There's 4 just chairs. And it sounds like someone sits down in one of those chairs. And I walk up and like have a thermometer, back when, we're all getting started, everybody bought the thermometers and all that stuff. But you realize there wasn't much to them. But so I'm walking up to this chair and had the red dot in this chair. And I'm facing the back of the chairs here, and it's facing me. And I'm looking, just looking at the chair. And all of a sudden it's just 90 degrees just turns.
Oh my God.
I'm like, okay, that's pretty interesting. And so we'd done a few other things there, and we was getting ready to go. And my son was walking with somebody down to the parking lot, and I'm sitting on the stoop on the church, and the door is still open on the front of the church. And I'm laying back because it was hot. It was a hot summer night. I'm laying back on the concrete, cooling down, and I hear this growl come from inside the church. I'm like, all right, yeah, okay, I'm done. We're out of here. So I get up, and I still went up and closed the door, closed the door in the church. And it was one of the first times I ever said, hey, done all the prayers, hey, you can't go with me, nobody's allowed to come with me, this and that. First time I ever done it, that I never said it. So we get home. I was in an apartment, like I said, I was recently divorced, so I live in a little apartment. And the front door walked into like a mud room, and then my bedroom's off the mud room, and the living room was off to the right of the mud room. And I walked in, or me and my son walked in. He went into either take a shower or to his bedroom. I can't remember which. It was like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I sat down in my recliner for a second, and I'm sitting there, and I hear the doorknob on my front door. I hear it jiggle, and I hear my front door open. And I'm like, well, maybe I didn't get it shut. The wind's not blowing. So I went and I shut it. I didn't lock it, but I shut it, and I pulled on it to make sure it was shut. Went back and I sat down in my chair again because my interest was already peaked to what's going on. And it did it again. I hear the doorknob jiggle and the door opens. So that's when I got up and I said, hey, you're not welcome here. You need to go back where you come from. In the name of Jesus Christ, you need to leave, but that's probably one of the only times from a location that something's ever followed me home.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I think I would have moved. But then you just deal with it again at the next place. So
right.
Yeah. Oh man. So have you ever lived in a haunted house yourself?
Yeah. I mean, the one when I was a kid where I had my shadow figure experience, that
but as an adult?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had moved from that other house and we moved around for a little bit, and then moved into another. We finally settled in a home that we bought. My parents bought when I was in 6th grade, I believe it was. And there was always some weird stuff happened there. And then when I got older, I actually got the house off of mom and dad. I got married and I bought the house, and then it just had some weird stuff had happened. But we still don't know, like I said, the whole, what Dad called the O'Dell curse, whether that was something related to that.
Right.
because I experienced something, my son experienced something, had experiences there. But there's still, like, every once in a while here at this home, I see things. My wife doesn't, but she believes me when I say, and my youngest son just come in. He has seen a couple of things, and it's usually a shadow or a shadow person or something like that. And that's what we've always considered that part of it, and a couple other things. The O'Dell curse, like I said, my dad's always called it.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see where that curse came from.
I do know probably from where it came from.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I can. I mean, if you want me to share that, I
Sure.
can.
Yeah.
Well, when my dad was 5 years old, he stayed with his grandmother quite a bit, and he would tell us stories, and through other family members, I guess I've heard a couple of them that she was a witch. She was like not a granny witch, not that the post or home remedy stuff like that. No, she was full blown, pretty nasty witch. He said,
Oh, wow.
he stayed with her a lot, and he said at 5 years old, he was actually going. He went to her house. They lived down the road from his grandmother. And he went to her house and was going up the stairs. He said, I was 2 steps from the top of the stairs. And that leads into my dad. My dad had a fear of the top 2 steps. It scarred him for his life. He hated the top stairs any place he went. But anyway, when he got to the top 2, at the top 2 stairs from the top, he says, I swear to you. He said, to anything you want me to, that the devil itself walked out of my grandmother's room and was standing in front of me at the top of the stairs when he's 5 years old.
Wow.
So he believes that's where the curse comes from, because he's seen what he saw. And then he had several experiences through his life. Then I had experiences. Both my brothers have had experiences, but I've had more than they have. It's kind of affected me more, which I think there's a whole thing to that. I think why. Okay, well, here we'll just go into it. He's seen that. He ended up then later in his life. He had experiences as a kid, other experiences. Then later in life, he was drafted into Vietnam. He went to Vietnam. He has pretty bad experiences there. And he actually, why he was there, he took a young boy's life there. This kid came out with a gun, and my dad shot him. So me growing up, I can remember my dad screaming, waking up at night, with night terrors. And I asked him one time, I said, what are the terrors from? Why are you screaming? He's like, and he said that this boy that he shot would come into his room and would grab him by the foot and try to drag him out of bed. And he would tell us that. And there was other things that happened, and there was a couple other things that went on. And there's always was a little boy or a shadow person or a little boy involved in all these stories. So then another time he was in bed, and he said he woke up, and he said, you were standing beside the bed. And I'm like, what? He said, you were standing there. And he said, I told you going back to bed, and you turn around and go back to bed. And he said, this happened like 2 or 3 nights. He said, on the 3rd night, he said, you come back in the room, and he said, boy, I told you, you just stay in bed, go back to your bed. And he said, he said, I sat up, and he said, I went to, usher you along there a little bit. And he said, but my arm went straight through you. He said, but I'm telling you, it was you. So that went on for a little bit. And this is when I was about 1st grade. And then I can remember my dad, things would happen, the screaming and stuff, and waking up at night. And then I noticed his, as a kid, I said, well, my dad doesn't, he's acting different, could tell, seems like his face would change at times, just looked like his face changed. him and my mom argued a couple times, or a few times, but I remember this one time they were arguing, and they were back and forth because he was just like something was wrong, and he actually grabbed my mom by the neck.
Oh my gosh.
My mom was a bigger lady, and he picked her up. My dad's 5'6", 150 or 60 pounds, and he picks her up. And we had a wood burning stove in the house, and I don't know why this was sitting there, but there was a 2x4 sitting there. She grabbed that 2x4 and she hit him. She hit him right across the side of the face, and he just turns and he laughs at her. He smiles at her,
Wow.
and he puts her back down. Well, she gets a hold of my grandma, and I mean, a lot of people are gonna think, oh, this is a crazy story, but this is what happened. She gets a hold of my grandma, and next thing I know, here comes my grandma. And to this day, I don't know who she brought with her, but I think it might have been my Uncle Frank. I only met my Uncle Frank once or twice in my life, and I remember the man had a suit on. He was tall, lanky, grayish hair, black gray. And when I met my Uncle Frank years later, that's what he looked like. It was my great uncle. And I'm thinking that might have been who it was. Like I said, I was only in first grade. And she told me and my brother's 3 years younger than me. She said, "You boys go outside." So we go outside, and my brother's off the porch. I'm standing on the porch, and I can hear my grandma screaming or yelling. I could hear my dad, and I could feel this vibration on the porch, the whole, because we lived in a little tiny trailer, and I could feel this like vibration. And next thing I know, the door flies open on this trailer, and this wind hits me. It hits me.
Oh my gosh.
Straight through. So I think that's where where the curse comes from, with my dad, and it's been passed along. I think the reason I had more experiences through my life is because of that reason. But I ended up having, and then not too long after that, when I was in second grade, 7 or 8 years old, is when I started seeing the shadow people. Then I learned later in life, when I was like 14 or 15, my mom told me that I used to play with a little boy. She goes, "You had an imaginary friend?" And I was like, "What?" She goes, "Yeah, you used to come in and you sit on my vanity and you talk to the little brown boy in the mirror." So,
oh my gosh.
So there again, there's a little boy. And then my oldest son was born, and he was, I think, 4 or 5 when his mom and I split up and divorced. And he would come over the house, and this is the house we lived in. I told you I ended up getting off mom and dad, and I had some weird stuff happen there. And he would come over, and he's like, tell me. He said, "No, Dad." He said, "I don't want to go in there." I was like, "Why don't you want to go in there?" He's like, "Well, because the house is cold." "What do you mean it's cold? What do you mean it's cold?" He said, "It's cold." And he said, "Well," I said, "What do you mean it's cold?" He said, "Well, there's a little boy in there. It makes it cold." And I said, "What do you mean, what little boy?" He said, "He's a little boy, and he said he tells me things." He said that that he's going to hurt you or hurt mommy, or I'm doing, all kind of stuff. I said, "What's he look like?" And he said, "Well, his name's Kevy." And he said, "He looks like me." He said, "He's the same size as me and stuff." He said, "But the only thing is," he said, "he's got yellow eyes and sharp teeth." And this is what he would tell me. So I was like, "Well, I can't have this." And how, so I went to my grandma, knowing what my grandma did for my dad. And I was like, "Hey, this is what's going on in my house. This is what Justin's telling me. What can I do?" And she goes, "You just need to," she told me what to read. And she goes, "You just need to fight for your house." And I'm like, "Okay." And I went in, and I was like, "Hey," I was like battling, and nothing actually came at me or near me. But I was like, "Hey, this is my home. I basically was battling with this thing." But then there were a few things happened after that. One night I would have stuff come up missing in my home, and then it would, next thing I know, it'd be here. I bought a tool one time, an actual chisel that I was tearing down this block building. I needed this tool, and I couldn't find it, and I couldn't find it, and I couldn't find it. And I was like, "Where in the world is my chisel?" I go to bed one night, and here's my chisel laying under my blankets. on my bed. So I moved it off my bed and I put it back in the kitchen. And I went in, I laid down, and I'm laying on my left-hand side. And I just had closed my eyes, but you're ready to doze off. And I could feel the whole side of my face feel like it got cold. And I hear this voice, like a man's, it sounds like a man's voice. And it just like, hey, are you asleep yet? And I'm like, holy whatever. I'm like, yeah, yeah, I'm just about there, but not now.
Not yet. Now
yeah.
I'm wide awake. Thanks.
Right. You're right. Thanks a lot. But yeah, a few things happened like that eventually. And then, over times I've had experiences and now my son, every so often, my youngest son, he will say, hey, I see this in a house. And I was like, okay, you just got to say you can't be here. And I've seen the shadow here a couple of times as well. But yeah, that's basically how it's all come about, I guess.
So what started you looking into like other crazy and wild things?
What, like Bigfoot and stuff? Like Bigfoot and stuff, or
yeah.
Again, it was my son and I started the Facebook page. His interest was there more than mine at first. Where I just, we started the page to give people an avenue to share their stories, and it led to me talking to a lot of them, whether it was phone calls, instead of this, like sharing, they would message me, they would email me. Then I would talk to some, there's times I would talk for 2 or 3 hours with somebody,
wow.
Trying to help them understand what they were experiencing, or, what, how do I get rid of it? And I'm like, I really don't know. If it's a creature if it is a creature that's, I don't know, but things like that, and it just grew. People started messaging me quite a bit, and then I, hey, can you come out and check this out? And I would go out to the property, look around, see what I could find. That's why I call them. A lot of people are like Bigfoot researcher. No, I'm not. They're like, what do you mean? You go out here and do this. I'm like, yeah, but I don't have that spot, I guess you'd say, that I can continuously go and set and research what's going on in this property, or what could be going on, or what, what I do is I go, if somebody calls me, say, it's just like I did with paranormal investigation, I go out and investigate what they're saying, and see if I can find any kind of tangible evidence to, support what they've been seeing. And so that's why I don't really consider myself a researcher. Now I'll research older accounts, like online maybe, or like the wild man stories or stuff like that. But as far as like having that central location that I can go down and sit down and look at something all the time, I don't have the privilege of doing that. So I don't really consider myself a researcher per se. So
now, have you, I could swear somewhere that I saw you wrote a book.
Yeah, well,
I'm pretty sure I saw it.
Yeah.
Yep. I think I even have that now that I think about it.
What it is some of those reports and encounters that people had, that I wouldn't say that I wrote the book. I had it in a binder. I actually have, I got way more than what's here in the binder. And then when I got connected with the West Virginia Bigfoot Museum, what happened is, helped get that up and started with donating a lot of stuff that I had, or what stuff I had. Part of that was a small folder that had several accounts in it, and they left it there, and where folks can come and read it.
Oh, wow.
And many people were like, hey, can I buy this? Can I buy this? Can I buy this? And they're like, no, that's just his research folder. And then there was a publishing company out of Charleston, West Virginia, that they had worked with, and they said, hey, we'd like to publish that. Would you want to put that in a book? And I'm like, yeah, I get, yeah. They're like, no cost to you. We'll front this all, we'll, put it out there for you. I'm like, okay. So I'll tell people it's not grammatically correct. And there's a lot of places it's probably nowhere near grammatically correct, because it's
their stories.
It's their stories. The way they talk, the way pretty much a lot of it's how it's written. Yeah, and people are like, and I'm like, it's not a masterpiece. It's not that type of book. It's not, it's a book of stories and reports that I've taken, and some that I have just found online and to share with people.
I think that's fascinating because I love to hear people's
Yeah,
stories, no matter what the story is.
right,
I mean, I was telling you before the show, I was just a week and a half ago at somebody's property who was having Bigfoot stuff happening. And it turned out that we had some unexplained lights in the
right,
sky. I never saw anything Bigfoot related, but that, I'm not knocking that that's not what he's got going on. But
right,
yeah, I get lots of different reports on all different kinds of stuff. People, I don't know, I guess they think I'm just crazy and they can open up to me and tell me all their stuff.
right.
You probably get the same thing.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I can tell that guy.
I think it's once folks start to trust you and see
Mhm.
and they start coming to you, and then the other people say, hey, they're talking to this person and able to share their story. More people come forward, and
Mhm.
that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted with the West Virginia Cryptids and Strange Encounters page. I wanted people to have that place that they can share without being ridiculed. I if somebody shares something and somebody puts some dumb remark on there, like, "Hey, the hillbillies down here," I ain't arguing with you. I'm gonna
No.
boot your butt off of it. I'm done with you. I don't care. I'm not about the numbers on the page. I mean, although like I said, there's a lot of people in there, and that makes me happy. I'm glad because people are able to share and see stuff.
Right.
But I'm not about that. I don't. If I have 5 people in there that can talk to one another and with how do I want to put it? Can talk to each other comfortably, or however you want to say it.
Yes.
With that's fine with me. That's what I wanted. That's how I wanted. If you don't want to, yeah. There's some wild stories that come across, and I'm like, hey, I've had some experiences too that people won't believe, So I'm
Yeah.
not going to judge.
Right.
But if you're on the page, why are you on the page if you want to bash and other? That's probably why you're there, to bash people. I don't want you there. I don't need you there.
Yeah. Some people just aren't happy unless they're
Right.
yeah, I've been on a couple of sites that have a lot of people on it. I'm not sure how or why, but the whole time I'm thinking, I don't even know why I'm on this site because all it is bashing that they just rip
Right.
you apart. I'm like, this isn't. Yeah, it's it can be pretty good for you for monitoring all of that because that would make me crazy.
Yeah. It's tough sometimes.
Oh my gosh, how many people do you have to helping you do that? Just you.
Just me.
That's a full-time job all by itself.
Yeah, it gets rough sometimes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So have you gone and talked to anybody that you thought, holy crap, like she's got anything like particularly scary that you thought, man, like you might want to move?
Yeah. Well, actually, they did move. Let me start with that one.
Good for
We'll
them.
just go. Yeah. I got a call from this lady, and both. I actually talked to both of them. I said, "Hey, we got some stuff going on in the house. There's some weird noises at times. We hear step or like footsteps on the stairs. And the husband's like, yeah, just come get out of my house. I ain't dealing with it. I don't want to say, stuff like that. So again, I went and I took my son that is now 18. He was probably 14 or 15, 14, I think. And he wanted to go with me. So we went to this house, and they wanted to know what we were going to do, or what was I going to do. And I was like, okay, So I had my spirit box, my SB7, and I had a like real long aux cord, and I set a speaker out in the middle of the floor, and I've shown them how that worked. They were kind of skeptical how, which a lot of people are, but I were sitting there, and it was not. I think it was like 43 or 44 seconds that I had the spirit box going, and all of a sudden, this voice comes across there and goes, "Hey, Les," just that clear, and I could probably find it on my phone if you wanted me to. And
Crazy.
the lady just starts cracking up, and I repeat it because I hear it because I want to, and and when it says "Hey Les," I went "Hey Les," and she starts just laughing, like thought it was, for some reason thought this was extremely funny. So I'm like, okay, and so we start talking a little bit more, and trying to get some, or asking questions, and it does the typical quintessential get out, just like that, get out. And I'm like, okay. And I told the gentleman there, it's like, hey, you want to ask some questions? You go ahead anytime you want to ask. So when it says get out, and he goes, hey, why do you want us to leave? And it goes on a few seconds, that, and it goes, Tiffany. And I like, well, that's pretty cool because his wife is sitting right there on the couch. Her name's Tiffany.
Oh my gosh.
Well, she didn't find that. She didn't find that very funny.
I bet not.
So you're going a little bit long, going again a little bit, ask a few more questions, and all of a sudden it just blurts out and it goes, a-hole. And I'm like, okay, who's an a-hole? And again, and it goes, Jordan. Jordan's her daughter sitting on the couch with her mom,
Oh
Tiffany.
my gosh.
So then right then and then I was like, hey, I said, I can tell you guys right now, you got something that's intelligent here. It's not a residual thing. I don't, we're going to figure out what's going on. I'm just going to go shut this down, and we'll see what we can do to get some help. And then he's like, okay, but what else would you do to show us anything? I was like, okay. I use dowsing rods. And like, what do you mean dowsing rods? And you're like, water witching? I was like, well, kinda, And a lot of people, they're like, well, that doesn't work, does it? I'm like, well, it depends on what you believe or they do or not, I guess. So I get out there, I have my dowsing rods and I'm holding them, and I asked, I said, I said to this thing in the house, this entity or whatever, it's like, show me where you're at. I want to know where you're at. So we're standing in the living room, and they turn like, I got to lay this out for you. We're in this big living. They live in an older home, had real nice, big, tall ceilings, living room, stairwell went upstairs, a foyer, beautiful home. And they turn to go out through the living room door. And when you get in there, that's the foyer. They turn to the right, went toward the front door, turned to the left. That starts to take you up the stairs. And you had like 2 or 3 stairs, then a landing, then several stairs, and another landing. Then it turns again, 2 or 3 stairs, and then there was a hallway. I guess you call it a hallway. There's a banister, and the rooms are off that. So it takes me up the stairs. Every turn it turns, the dowsing rods turns, takes me into the daughter's room, and they cross right in this corner. They cross in the corner, and there's a bucket. There's a bucket sitting on the floor, and there's water in the bucket. And on the ceiling, there's black on the ceiling, and there's water dripping out of this spot in the ceiling. And they're like, we don't know what it's from. It's done that for months now. It just drips water. So I'm standing there, I was like, well, that's interesting. They're crossed here. There's got to be something about this. And then all of a sudden, both the rods just slam all the way backwards. Like they turn like this. So I turn around and follow them. And then it takes me back out into the hallway, turns right. Their son's room's clear down the end of the hallway. Their room's off to the right. When I get to their room, it turns. It goes in their room, turns right as it goes in the door, then goes to the bed, turns left, and right beside the bed, it crosses again. And I was like, who? I said, I know this is your guys' room, but who sleeps on this side? And the husband's like, I do. I said, have you ever had anything weird happen in this room? They said, yeah, we hear noises sometime coming from the closet, which is directly on the, like where that spot is on the wall in their daughter or roof just right on the other side. They would hear some odd sound. I'm like, okay. So I said, there's something going on here. There's no need for me to do an investigation. You've got something going on. We've already heard my name. We heard Tiffany's name. We heard Jordan's name. It's intelligent. I'm going to get you help. So I went to PA. I went to a friend's meeting. They had some meetings, and I was talking to one of my friends there who's a psychic or whatever you want to call her. I hate saying psychic all the time because some of them don't like that or don't. But anyway, I let her listen to the recording. I was like, what feeling do you get from this? And she goes, it's nothing demonic, not at all. She goes, but it is a pretty nasty male entity that would prefer all the women in that house die than be in his house.
Wow.
So I'm like, really? So I went back and I called the lady and I was like, hey, this is what my friend's telling me. You know, I want to make sure you guys are safe. And she goes, well, I want to tell you a few other things since you're telling me this. She goes, since we moved in here 4 years ago, my husband has not exactly been my husband. He's my husband, but you can tell his demeanor has changed. I was like, what do you mean? She goes, he's kind of not physically abusive or anything like that. Don't take me wrong when that, she says, but he's mean spirited toward me and my daughter, not the two boys, just me and my daughter. I'm like, really? I was like, okay, that's pretty interesting. I was like, maybe something in the house is kind of affecting his personality, his or whatever. So when he got, I said, I'd like to talk to him. So when I went over and when he got home, I'm like, hey, can I talk to you? And I told him what my friend had told me. And he you could see that he knew what I was talking about. He's like, yeah. He said, I said, well, how do you feel when you're home? He said, man, when I'm here, I feel pissed all the time. I just feel upset. And I was like, what about when you're gone? He said, no, I feel great when I'm not here. He said, but when I'm coming home, it's like, hey, I'm angry and there won't be any reason, So I was like, well, I think you're being affected by this presence in your home, So let me get some folks in here to help you take care of it. So I contacted a couple people that I know that do cleansings, and they do cleansings based on the faith in that home. That's how they do it. They don't do it based on their faith. They do it whatever faith you are in that house. That's how they to make the people, because the folks were like, I don't know about that. We're this and like, well, they do cleansings based on your faith. They're like, okay. So I got a hold of them, and I just told them minimal of what was going on. And I was like, but this is what we need to help them. So when I met them, we went to the house, I introduced them, and I told, and the lady that helped me, her name was Gwen also. And I said, hey, Gwen,
the best ones are.
I said, I would like for you to go in first, cause she was sensitive. And I said, your husband, I want him to follow you. I'll follow you both. Anything happens, you guys communicate, but I'll be there to see what's going on. So we go in the home. Immediately, she starts up the stairs. She goes up and she gets 2 steps from the top landing, and I see her grab the handrail or the railing, and she leans back, and her husband puts his hands up like that, and he goes, what's wrong? And she goes, something just tried to push me down the stairs. So she goes up, she goes straight to that daughter's bedroom. She's like, there's something, this is not good here. There's something here. She followed the same steps I did, but I haven't told her about this. And goes into the mom and dad's room, goes beside the bed, and she stops and she puts her hands out, and she's, and I can see her close her eyes. She's not saying anything, but you could see mentally she's having an argument or something with somebody. And then she stops and she turns around and I look at her and say, well, are you okay? She goes, yeah. She goes, he's nasty. He's really nasty. He's threatening to kill me. He's calling me all kind of names. She goes, and she looks at me. She goes, I'm going to get this SOB out of here. So we went downstairs. We told the people at home what was going on. And they were sitting on the couch here, sitting down. And the oldest son just starts getting like he's aggravated. He's like, I'm going outside. I was like, no, you're not, buddy. You're staying right here. They're going to do a cleansing. They're going to cleanse you. They're going to cleanse the house. They're going to cleanse, because he was staying, he was like 18 or something. He was staying in like a little trailer outside, like a little camper. And so they're going to cleanse your trailer. You're not leaving. So they did the whole cleansing and binding. It was like 2 or 3 hours they did doing this stuff. And they went on and on. And next thing I know, the mom's like, wow, it feels different in here. It feels lighter, and so the daughter started saying the same thing, and they come down and they're okay, we're done. And we told the folks, they're like, they did this, but this may not be a permanent solution. This is just the first step. It may have to be done more times. It may take a while. And I'm like, okay. So we all left, said our goodbyes, and I kept in touch. And the following week, I called and say, hey, how's everything going? Everything's great. The house is, everything's good. And the husband's great. Second week, same thing. Third week, I call and I could tell there was something different. There's something wrong. I'm like, are you okay? And she goes, yeah. She goes, but we're hearing the footsteps and stuff again. I'm like, okay, let me get a hold of my friends. We'll come back in. We'll take care of it again. And it might be a little bit because they're off they were doing some trip or something. I forget what it was. I said, but I'll get them back in. So I finally got a hold of them, and I called her back. I was like, hey, we can be back in a couple of days. This would have been a week later, or a little over a week later. And she goes, no, she goes, no, don't worry about it. I'm like, all right, why? What's going on? Is everything quitting, or she goes, no. We got tired of it. We just packed up. We left. We moved. They just decided to leave, and
oh my God.
They moved to another part of the town, and I know where they live, and I've talked to them after that, and they're like, they're happy as can be. They're not having any issues anymore, and they just up and left and said, we're done with it.
Now, see, that makes me question: is that thing still in the house, and is it affecting the new people that are there?
Right.
You heard anything?
No, I haven't.
You haven't gone up and knocked on the door and went, excuse me?
I've wanted to. I wanted to, but I didn't. I was like, maybe I shouldn't. But one of these days I may.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. One of our watchers here asked, when you were telling this story, asked if you thought it could be radon gas.
I mean, it could be, but that wouldn't explain the voices. I mean, it's clear came across my recorder.
I'm gonna close my door quick.
Yeah.
I hear my husband mowing grass.
Yeah. Yeah. It clearly came across the device, the sound or the voices. I mean, there's other explanations for some things, but
would radon gas affect everyone, not just
right.
That's
right.
I would assume.
Yeah, most times radon gases come from a basement. There was no basement in this home. Normally they come from a basement setting, or homes with basements. Interesting.
That is a crazy story.
Well, then there was a little bit of the history of the house. It was actually at one time, because the old houses has the big bow windows and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was used. It was a, I guess you say funeral home, not necessarily a funeral home, but there's a big graveyard behind it, but it was used for some showings and stuff in its time.
Wow.
Yeah. So
interesting. That is crazy.
Yeah.
That's really crazy. Now, when you look, do you always look up like the history of whatever location you're going to?
I mean, some people do it prior. I don't always look it up, but if I do, it's usually after, because I don't want to preconceived notions. I want to see what matches up.
Right. Well, that's what a good paranormal investigator does.
Right.
When people call me, I tell them I don't want to know anything.
Right.
I'm just going to come over and we'll check things out. And then after the investigation, I'll sit them down and go, okay, tell me what's going on.
Right.
Because it's just, kind of like a validation.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you. Absolutely. Wow. That's, I can remember being a little girl, and I never even told anybody about this till about 5 or 6 years ago. But there was a gentleman that used to stand in our living room. He was completely dark. I always said like a dark brown or a black, and he had a hat on. I never saw his face, but he would just stand there like a statue. But I would see him in different places in the living room at different times. And I don't know, I guess I just assumed as a probably 5 or 6 years old that everybody saw the guy standing in the living room. So it never dawned on me that this could be like anything.
Yeah, the Hat Man.
Yeah, but I remember him, I mean,
Right.
vividly to this day, this guy in my house when I was a little
Yeah.
girl. Yeah, it's so
Yeah, that's an interesting phenomenon in itself, the Hat Man.
the
Yeah.
Hat Man. And I never realized until in a few weeks, I think it's July 6th, I'm having on Mike Rickseeker, and
Yeah.
we're going to be talking about shadow people. And I was reading his book, and I was like, there's a whole like section on the Hat Man, and I was
Mm.
like, oh my God.
Yeah.
That's what I had in my house when I was a little kid.
Yep.
It's kind of crazy, but
I
that's, yeah.
yeah, it's wild. I mean, different. I mean, there's a couple different style hats it wears, but it's pretty wild story phenomena. I've talked to a couple people that's experienced that. One of them was my wife's cousin's daughter. We went to their house probably Mason's 7. He was so about 5 years ago. He was like 2, and her cousin's telling me that her daughter was experiencing this phenomenon or this thing in her room, and it would talk to her and stuff like that, and she goes, but there's one weird thing about it, and before she could even say it, I said, it wears a hat, doesn't it? And she said, holy, yeah, how do you know that? And I was like, because of what other things you were telling me, I was like, it's a whole phenomenon. She thought it was something that only she was seeing. She thought maybe it was a relative. And I was like, no, there's a whole phenomenon called the Hat Man.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Have you had any encounters with said Hat Man?
No, I have not. No.
I'm still curious and wondering what it wanted.
Yeah.
Like, why was it just standing there? It was just standing there. Like, I don't.
Yep.
I finally told my mom like 6 years ago or so, and she was like, "Why didn't you tell me?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I didn't feel threatened or anything by it, but I clearly remember it being there.
Yeah.
But I don't know what the hell it was."
What I experienced as a kid, I have no idea what it was either. And
what
that
you had
and
going on was scary.
And
I
I
was
still
freaked out.
It still leaves me with questions every time I try to find an answer. I think I found an answer, and then nope, it's another question. And in that, years later, like you was talking about, you mentioned it to your mom. Years later, because I've never really told anybody about what I experienced when I was a kid. There was another radio show or whatever you want to call it. Dave Schrader. He used to have he used to have his radio show, and he wanted stories, and so I wrote that story out and I sent it to him, and it was the first one he read on his show, and I played it back on my phone for my dad. I was like, listen to this, Dad. I wrote a story, and to this fella, and I was like, he looks at me, he goes, yeah. He said, he said, yeah. He looks at me, he goes, that was Michael's Hill. That's where the farm was, called Michael's Hill. And I never told him about that. I was like, how do you know? And he's like, I just know, so I'm like, did my dad did he experience something there? But he knew where the story was coming from.
That would lend me to believe that he's had something happen there.
Right.
Yeah. That's quite interesting. I know I moved into my house with my husband, where we currently live. And immediately I started to notice things. Like you said, you'd put something down and you go back to get it, and you're like in a complete opposite place in the house that you would have never sat it. And just weird, crazy things. And then one day I got touched. And that's really freaky to have that happen. But my husband's like, I never noticed anything before you came. So I don't know if I have something following me around, or if he just never paid attention. I don't, you know what I mean? Because I think some people can live with it for years and never notice.
Never knows.
That, hey, I sat that cup down in the kitchen and now it's in the bathroom. They're just like, oh, I must have just left it in the bathroom.
Oh, I just forgot it was in the bathroom. Anyway.
Yeah. So it's weird how that can happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very, very weird.
It is.
I know I haven't paranormal investigated since February of 22 because I had I went to Pennhurst.
Mm-hmm.
I was working there and I was showing a group, like we were doing a session, in the tunnels, and I had cleaned up all of the cans and the empty bottles that were in the tunnel, and I threw them away. Well, the next group I took down there, we're not down there 2 seconds, and I hear this can it was like it got kicked across the room at me, and I freaked right out. And I haven't, it was really crazy because then I had to explain to the group that, hey, did everybody hear that? And everybody's like, yeah, we heard that. I'm like, put your flashlights on, because we were doing sensory stuff. So I made everybody turn everything out.
Right.
And there's nothing anywhere on the ground that could make that sound. And I was like,
yeah,
that's freaky. I was like, now, if I had a shadow man, just inches from my face, I'd probably have a heart attack.
Yeah, it's stuck with me now for what, a little over 40 years. So
it imprints on you.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can remember it like it was yesterday. every time.
Oh, Here we have a comment. Melissa says she's always had paranormal experiences starting as a kid. She's been touched many times. I can't even count them all. Do you notice with some people here, she says again, I always assumed it was from a passed on family member.
That it's possible, or some people have attachments. Like I was telling you about the curse. Years ago, I actually went to an old lady. I forget why I went. It was through a friend and through a friend of my girlfriend's at the time. And she's like, yeah, this old lady reads your palms and reads cards and and stuff like that. And I was like, what? And so they talked me into going. I was like 18 years old. And I walked in, and as soon as I walked in, she looked at me. She didn't read anything. She didn't read my palm. And she looked right at me. She goes, you have an attachment that's been with you all your life. And that's exactly what she told me. And I'm like, what? And I didn't know what that meant. She goes, you have an attachment. She goes, there's a spirit that's attached to you, and it's been with you your entire life. And I'm like, okay. Yeah.
That's before cell phones and internet and
before any of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not like she could look you up.
Nope.
That's insane.
I was like, okay. Then later on, I was like, yeah, maybe she's right. So.
Now, did your grandmother ever pass any of her? I know you said she was like a dark witch.
That was my great grandma.
Your great grandma.
Yeah.
Did she pass any of those things along with the knowledge of witchcraft?
No, not that I know of. No. No. Yeah. My grandma, we always called, she was what they would call the granny witches. There's these little, oh, don't do this because of this, or take this in case you got this wrong, or all these little folklore things and lore, and like, hey, like one of them, she used to tell us, if somebody dies in a house, make sure you carry them head first out. And we always, people are like, why? She goes, that way the deceased can wave goodbye to the living. That was one of them. She also told us if somebody dies in a house, always cover the mirrors and windows, because the soul get trapped in the mirrors, especially. Just different ones about. So I remember there was one about matches. You stick a match in the door frame. It done something with visitors. Some weird stuff she used to tell us.
That's crazy.
Write down somebody's name. If somebody was giving you grief or something, you write their name down, you take it out in the yard with milk and you bury it, and does something. I forget what it was, but yeah, there's a bunch of different ones like that she would tell us.
That's crazy. I love hearing that. That's awesome. I love those folklore type of stuff. I actually, probably nobody knows this about me except for a small few. So this is going to be a big piece of information, but I actually practice Wicca myself.
Okay.
But I am like your grandmother, right, who, I don't do bad things to people, and I'm very medicinal. Like, I grow my own herbs and I make my own tinctures, and I try not to take over-the-counter medicines because I can treat myself with what's growing in my yard. So I'm that kind of. But so hearing those stories from your grandmother, that's pretty funny. I'm gonna have to look up some of that stuff.
Yeah, there's a bunch more, but I just can't remember them.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's
Oh yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
We do
But
have a comment here from a gentleman. For 3 years now, they've been trying to work out what happened to me and my brother. We had a dimensional paradigm time slip experience in the United Kingdom. And then he also states, has Les ever spoken to anyone who has said similar or time slip experience?
yeah, I have a couple people, and I think I may have had one myself at one time. I so I'll just share that with you, I guess, because um, I I was like 13 years old, and I stayed. My dad, like I said, was a Vietnam vet, so he taught me to do a bunch of stuff, and I would stay. I would stay in the woods at 12, 13 years old. I was staying there for a week at a time by myself, just, and I would forage for food. Fish, and I stayed where I was staying at the time was on the ridge above my grandma's, and about a quarter mile or so from my grandma's, or more, or somewhere near a quarter mile. But I would hike that same ridge line every day. I would go out to where there was persimmon trees on these right of ways, and persimmon trees, and there was berries, and there was a pond clear at the end of the holler. I would fish, and I did that every day. I'd collect nuts and stuff and whatnot. Well, one day that I'm going out this ridge, the same trail. And if you veered off the trail, it just went downhill on both sides. And I'm walking along, and it dawned on me that something that it looks different. The trees look different. The foliage looks different. It's like big ferns, like almost like what you see, like if you see like a rainforest, like if you see some of the, there's some pictures out there, depictions of like when dinosaurs are alive, like these huge ferns and stuff like it. Well, I see these big ferns. I'm like, hey, this isn't. Am I lost? This isn't right. This doesn't look right. And then I noticed I could see the wind moving the trees, but I can't hear it. I don't feel it. I don't hear birds. I don't hear anything. So then I freak out, and I turn and start running, and went against what I was taught. If you're lost, you don't run. You
Right.
try to stay. No, I'm running back to where I knew I was supposed to be. And within a minute or two of running, I stopped, and I realized I'm back. This is familiar. I can hear everything. I can feel the wind. And to this day, I've been up there, or for several times after that, I stayed up here. I walked that ridgeline and have never found that spot. And to this day, I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was a time slip or something like that, but yeah, it happened, and I just don't know what it was. So as far as that, yeah, that's my experience.
That is interesting. Have you had anybody else report anything like that happening?
I've heard one story where I think it was a lady and her daughter. I think it was a lady and a daughter. They were traveling. They stopped at this diner. I think it was like a little diner or a little store, and they went on. They went on about their way after they had done what they needed to do in the store, and they went back, and it was coming back through, and they wanted to stop back again because they thought it was a nice little store. And when they got to where they thought the store was supposed to be, the only thing that was there was like an old foundation. There was no building anymore or anything like that. So that's one of them. The other one was a gentleman told me that which I don't know if this is a true story or not. He told me it was a true story, but I've heard other stories in books about, similar to this, that he was like out just traveling. He was hitchhiker, I guess you'd call it. He was just traveling, with a backpack on, and he's out and it's pouring down the rain, and he comes up to this house, and he's like, man, he said, I need to get out of the rain. And I wonder if they'd let me, come in for a little bit, get something to eat. And he goes up and he knocks on the door, and this girl in a dress opens the door, and he comes in. She offers him, something to eat and drink into the kitchen. He goes into the kitchen, sits down at the table. She brings him something to eat and drink. She walks back upstairs. He sits there for a while. She comes back down again. Then, he eventually goes on about his way. The rain quits. And, well, sometime later, he comes back, and the house is just like in shambles. It's, you can tell it's been empty for years. The windows are broke, and he finds out that the lady, I see this goes to time slip ghost, I guess. He finds out that the young girl that actually, was his host had passed away, years earlier, and the family moved because she had passed away, and the house was just let go to ruins. But that was one of them I was told before.
Wow. Now that would freak me out.
Yeah.
That would freak me out a lot. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, that's insane. Wow. Melissa says where she used to live, she had to literally stop making fried chicken. Every time I tried to make it, I could feel someone's hands on my shoulder, standing behind me as if looking over my shoulder.
It's Colonel Sanders.
Making sure you don't mess up the special recipe.
Yeah, you stole the recipe, didn't you? No, that would freak me out, really. Yeah.
That would freak me out.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that would really freak me out. So let me ask you, based on all of the things that you've had reported to you, when it comes to, I'm 100% believer in ghosts because I live in a haunted house and I've had experiences my whole life. But when it comes to the things that are outside, like your Bigfoots and your dogmen and your, whatever, what do you think they could be? Do you think they are paranormal in nature or supernatural, or because I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of struggling with because I think I'm cohabitating with at least 2 Bigfoot.
Right.
We get things happening all the time. I actually saw one once, and so, but I can never seem like I hear them.
Yeah.
We get the howls, we get the growls, I get the tree knocks, but you can never find them.
Right.
So I'm like,
well, it depends on how you are you willing to separate what people are seeing, other people are seeing, or what some people are seeing, what other people are seeing. To me, aspects of certain stories definitely leans that they are a biological creature. The footprints that could be found. For example, the nest and stuff there in the Pacific Northwest that the Olympic Project have found, that is a product of some animal. There's no ghost going to say, I'm going to go out here and build a nest to lay in. Right. The stick structures that some people find. Did I lose you?
No, there you are.
I was like, uh-oh. Stick structures and stuff like that. I am, and some people don't like me hearing say it, I am highly on the fence with them. I really am. One, why, because I have questions. People ask, you're a Bigfoot believer. No, I'm not. I consider myself a skeptic believer. My belief comes from the people I talk to, credible people that I talk to, and how their stories will match up to other stories from other parts of the country and the world or whatever. That when these people don't know you. But my skeptical, investigating, I hate to say this, logical mind, I guess you'd say, still wants to know how, when, where, why. Why is this happening? Why can't we find this? Why can't we? And so that's where my skeptical side comes in. So with tree structures, I'm like, why would they build them? Why are they so small? I mean, yeah, they could be markers, but like some folks say. But also a lot of these structures that are found, you can't. You almost can't rule out human activity. Even deep in the woods, it's hard. You got guys out here that are bushcrafters that'll go out and they'll build these structures to stay in. You got groups like the Boy Scouts will teach survival that build these structures to stay in. So it's hard to say, all these are Bigfoot or some other creature. Now, some of the ones you find that are more in the West that, are like up in British Columbia and stuff like that are large trees that seem to be arranged, especially with the ones what they call the floating branch and stuff like that. Then you start to think, or then you start to question, or yeah, this is weird. It would take a good amount of people or some big folks to do this. So yeah, I'm on the fence about that stuff. I don't know. Let me think here. But the weird stuff, like some of the strange stuff, I will take, no matter what it is. I will listen to that person's story because I feel as a investigator, I have to, because if I don't, I'm not doing my due diligence.
Right.
Because I need to separate. If I had to separate, this here is strange. It doesn't belong with this. Well, this might be a whole different subject completely. Maybe one day we'll figure out what this is. Maybe there is some kind of interdimensional thing, whatever, but it's not even, and it's not Bigfoot. It's just something different.
Right.
And the reason I say that is because people are seeing things. We lost her again.
Yeah.
What people are seeing is based on what we're being shown. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe that's our minds trying to make sense of what they're seeing. This strange deal that's going on. Our minds like, hey, there's Bigfoot. And look how much Bigfoot has been ingrained into our society right now.
Yeah.
Or interjected in. So people are like, yeah, it's Bigfoot. It's got to be Bigfoot. But that's only because we're trying to make sense of what we're seeing. That person maybe, because we just, maybe you just don't know what it is.
Right.
And your brain just was like, yep, this is it. It's just like pareidolia. Our brains are trying to make sense of what we're saying.
Yep.
So we just say, hey, that's got to be.
I think he froze again. There you are.
There you are.
So let's see here. We have a Facebook user that said, if you need to understand about Bigfoot, you need to follow Sasquatch Chronicles by Wes Germer. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah, I listen
Australia,
to.
they have the Australian Yowie. Huh. Interesting. Did I say that right? Wes Germer?
Yeah. I listen to Sasquatch Chronicles all the time.
Oh, do you?
I listen to it every day, all day.
I have not, only because of the work that I do. I just don't, like, I try to start stuff in between calls on the ambulance, and then I get sidetracked with a call, and I don't ever get back to anything. So it's hard for me to listen to other people's podcasts, but I got to get better at it because there's a lot of good ones out there. David Lester says, new species are being discovered recently. The new species of orangutan. I'm not even going to butcher that name. I agree. Question everything. I know when I had my sighting, and I won't take up a lot of your time with this. I saw this thing crossing the cornfield, and I've hunted my whole life. And I'm staring at this thing, and I'm like trying to make heads or tails. Like I've seen lots of different animals in the woods. This thing was huge, and it was black, and it was walking on two legs. And we were going somewhere. My husband was in the car with me, never mentioned it. And I'm like quiet all afternoon. And he's like, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, didn't you see that thing in the woods? Like in the cornfield? He's like, what thing? And I'm like, I spent all day trying to fathom, figure out what I saw, because it was just insane. And now I'm spending all of my time trying to prove to myself that I'm not crazy.
Right.
It's bizarre.
And in my heart of hearts, I want Bigfoot to be an undiscovered ape, or and to me, that's pretty much that's what it is. When you find the evidence, evidence, I get, or I mean, I hate to say it that way, but we still don't know what we find sometimes. I have found tracks, and I know this may upset a few other people. I have found tracks that I suppose are Bigfoot. I've never seen a Bigfoot. I've never seen him make one. For all I know, it's a new type of ant that has like huge 6 feet that walk around. I don't know. Okay. But yeah, in my heart, all this, the evidence is found, the sightings that people have. I want it to be a biological, I want it to be an undiscovered ape or something like that. But the weird stuff that happens, that's something different, I still want to listen to that, and I won't bash anybody for telling me, I've had experiences in my life, and if they see something strange, tell me about it. Whether it's Bigfoot related or not, or spiritual related, or it's aliens, or it's dimensional thing, I don't know. But other things that I have people tell me, and the research, the research into stuff, I think it's an animal. It's got to be an animal.
So he's asking, are you more subscribed to believing this could be a supernatural human hybrid?
No. I believe, see, here's how I feel. Like I said, I think the things that people are seeing that basically describes an animal, it's an animal. But even with that, if you look in the definition of paranormal, which means not really, it's unexplained by scientific means, if you look in the Webster dictionary. So if you look at the ones that are animals that have the glowing red eyes, if that's an animal, has glowing red eyes, which no known ape that we know of has the tapetum lucidum that would actually cause the eyes to glow, right, or in light or without light. So even if it's a biological animal, that is something paranormal, not in the ghost sense or the paranormal sense. That's a paranormal attribute of that animal. So if you mean something like that, then yeah, I feel that they, if you go by what people what people talk about experiencing, there is something paranormal, in that sense.
Human footprint, none animal. You don't think they could be human footprints?
Oh, I mean,
I'm assuming that's what he meant.
Yeah, I was like,
human footprints.
What? Yeah, what do you mean by that? I mean, yeah, the footprints are human looking. When I mean animal, I mean like a biological creature. We're biological creatures. That's what I mean by an animal. Right, we're animals. Right.
Let's see here. We gotta look at Ross and Heather Gilroy. He is an Australian researcher and has lots of plaster crafts. And don't forget Ron Moorhead.
Yeah, Ron Moorhead definitely is into the paranormal, or well, I don't say paranormal, but the
quantum
dimensional
physics
thing. Quantum Bigfoot. I got his book back here.
Me too.
Yeah.
I haven't read it yet, but I got it. So what's next for you? Do you travel or go to vendor events and speak or anything like that?
Yeah, I just did the Forest County Bigfoot Festival in Pennsylvania, Marionville, Ohio, Pennsylvania. Saturday, I have the West Virginia Bigfoot Festival. I'm actually the symposium coordinator, I guess you'd say. I actually have the speakers, and I take care of the speakers and getting speakers. We have Daniel Benoit there, Michael W. Cook, Andrea Beals, Mike Familant's coming. And then that's on Saturday for the festival. And then on Friday, we have Ken Gerhardt and Lyle Blackburn going to be there for a banquet.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, and then I just do some hiking around here and there. And then July 15th, 16th, I think it is. 15th, I'm going to be in Perryopolis, PA at an event that my friends are putting on. I'm going to speak there. And then I'm going to be in Beaver Creek, Ohio on the 17th for a little event there speaking. and then I'm going to be doing one in November. And I think that's probably all I'm going to do this year, because I did a lot last year that took up just too, I enjoyed doing it, but I didn't get the chance to get out and do what I want to do much. But I think I will be doing one small, probably in July. I'll be doing a little bit of filming with a film crew, local.
Awesome.
I've been in a few projects with them. So hopefully it works out in July. I'll be with them again for a couple of days. And that's probably about it right now.
Well, feel free to come on up to the Central PA Bigfoot Festival in August.
In August?
In August 12th.
August 12th. I'll try.
Here in Ellisburg, you are more than welcome. If you want to speak, I'll make a room for you. I'll make room for you. Let's see. What else do we have going on here these days? Let's see here. Checking the I know because I'm the organizer, but I know for the festival we are still looking for vendors, and we've got a couple of food trucks coming, so that's going to be fun. We're also having Daniel Benoit and Michael Cook and Matt Arner and Sean Forker are all going to be there, and I just got another one today. He's going to be speaking about paranormal stuff. Oh yes, what's his name? I don't even know. Max Fuhrer, if I'm saying that correctly. I just picked him up today. He
nice.
He's going to be talking about paranormal stuff. So it's going to be a great time.
Nice.
So it was great having you on tonight.
Thank you.
We could probably go on for hours more, but I'm not going to do that to you.
Well, I hope nobody thinks I'm a nut, but I had a good time.
Oh, we're all crazy here. It's okay. Hang out with me until we get through all of the stuff, and then I'll let you go. So,
all righty.
Have a great night, everybody. Make sure you check in this Friday for This Week in Bigfoot with Brendan and the boys. It'll be another one of those great 30-minute news programs on Bigfoot and all the other stuff. So it'll be great. I'm looking forward to it. And we'll see you all in 2 weeks.
Bye, folks.
This has been a CARC Universal production.